Part 46. A Middle School Cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 453. Chapter 453 Monthly Serial Meeting. Whether it's Jean by manga artist Shizukawa, or Railgun by manga artist Makoto Shinkai, it has become a hot topic among readers just the day after the monthly magazine was released. In just one day, the editor of the monthly magazine received a large number of urging calls from readers and received the joy of the monthly magazine is on sale with favorable reviews. By the way, the reason why most readers call the monthly editorial department to urge them is largely because they are eager to see the next chapter of Jean and Railgun. Today is the second day of the release of the monthly magazine. After a day of fermentation, there seem to be more urging calls from readers. However, it is also at this time that the serialization meeting of the monthly magazine also begins. Although they were able to use the monthly serialization meeting to escape the horrible urging phone storm attack from the readers, several editors hiding in the monthly serialization conference room did not have time to be happy for a while when they saw Mr. Sasaki, the editor-in-chief of the monthly magazine, came in with Yoshida with a weird smile on his face and Yujiro with a silly smile on his face. The reason why the editorial duo composed of Yujiro and Yoshida once again participated in the serialization meeting of the monthly magazine was naturally because the manga Railgun by the cartoonist Makoto Shinkai was serialized in the monthly magazine, even though they were previously responsible for a certain monthly magazine at the call of the editor. The editorial side of the monthly magazine once sent out elite editors, hoping to obtain the editor-in-chief authority of the cartoonist Shinkai Makoto from Makoto Takahashi, but judging from the fact that Yoshida and Yujiro were able to attend the monthly serialization meeting, just think about it and you know what the final result will be. Ahem, before this serial meeting begins, I have to say one thing first. Before the deputy editor presiding over the meeting began to speak, the editor coughed slightly, and then said with a gloomy look, I remember that I have already said that since I have chosen to become a cartoonist for monthly serialization, I must at least finish the cartoon manuscript before the deadline, but I remember I also said that if the cartoonist's body does not allow it, then even if no matter how interesting the finished manga is, the monthly magazine will not choose to serialize it, so Toda-kun. Sorry, it was my dereliction of duty this time. The editor of a certain monthly magazine, no, it should be editor Toda, suddenly stood up and apologized to his colleagues present, because Mr. Takeda has been hiding his physical condition, and I have also been hiding it recently. During this period of time, I focused most of my attention on Takeda-sensei's comics, so. As editors responsible for cartoonists, your job is to urge the cartoonists to complete the cartoon manuscript before the deadline. This is understandable. But people who can sit in leadership positions seem to like to use this kind of Xianyang post-inhibition method to communicate with subordinates. It is said that this is a technology derived from human instinct. If an editor only pays attention to the cartoon manuscripts completed by the cartoonist and ignores the cartoonist himself, then I can only say that this kind of third-rate editor is not qualified to participate in the serialization meeting of the monthly magazine, or even as an editor. Not even qualified. Although editor Sasaki's words were serious, Toda didn't say anything else this time. Ever since yesterday, I heard that Mr. Takeda, the cartoonist in charge of him, suddenly fainted and was sent to the hospital due to overwork. Toda, the whole person is in bad condition. What makes Toda feel bad about himself is not the fact that manga artist Takeda-sensei's comics will be on hiatus for some time, but the guilt he feels towards himself for causing manga artist Takeda-sensei to be hospitalized. And self-blame. If it weren't for being too demanding, Takeda-sensei, a cartoonist whom I have known for 10 years, would not have tried to perfectly re-revise the completed manga draft in response to my request. If it weren't for being too pushy, the cartoonist who was his best friend wouldn't have fallen ill due to overwork. If it weren't for. Because it has become a fixed fact that cartoonist Takeda's comics have gone on hiatus, so in the following serialization meeting, what editor Sasaki said, Toda, who is the editor-in-chief of Takeda-sensei, did not listen carefully. At this moment, Toda the editor only hopes that this serial meeting can end as soon as possible, so that he can apologize to his friend who is undergoing treatment as soon as possible, and that he can let himself ease his inner guilt and self-blame a little. However, editor Toda's desire to be redeemed did not seem to be felt by the great will of the universe, because when the serialization meeting reached the new serialization selection for the next monthly issue stage, because of a certain editor's speech, let the meeting that was supposed to end quickly was extended. Can you guys take a look at this comic? Yoshida had a helpless smile on his face and pointed at the comic manuscript next to him. This was completed recently by Mr. Kuma from the Phoenix Academy. Yoshida, those are the manga manuscripts of White Rabbit Candy, right? The deputy editor who presided over the meeting showed a helpless smile after seeing the folder Yoshida put at hand. Because Mr. Takeda's monthly comic series The Publication is on hiatus, so starting from the next monthly issue, Phoenix Institute Teachers comic White Rabbit Candy will be serialized. Didn't everyone just discuss this? That's right. At the last serialization meeting, everyone has read the comic manuscript of White Rabbit Candy. Another head of the monthly editorial side took over the words of the deputy editor-in-chief and complained to Yoshida with some dissatisfaction. Unless the content of the comic White Rabbit Candy has been greatly changed by Mr. Nkuma after the last meeting, otherwise, I don't think it's necessary for everyone to read it again. Instead of wasting time on re-observing the comic White Rabbit Candy, it's better to think carefully about which new work to choose to serialize next. No, everyone, the comic manuscript in my hand is. Yoshida looked at the editorial side of the monthly magazine, and didn't know how to start. Hey, Yoshida, the comic manuscript in your hand, it can't be. The deputy editor looked at the strange expression. Yoshida, who was in a different place, suddenly had a crazy idea in his mind, and couldn't help but shout, could it be a new manga, another manga that Mr. Howin had recompleted? Didn't Yoshida just say that Mr. Howin had completed the second episode of White Rabbit Candy? Now he said that he had completed a new manga. This new manga? Hey, is this true? Complete 2 monthly serialized manga in 1 month? No, if a certain scientific railgun is included, it should be 3. How is this possible? This manga is called Hell Girl. Yoshida, who knew it would be like this, looked at his colleagues on the monthly editorial side staring at him with extremely surprised eyes. Although he was prepared in his heart, he still felt quite unnatural. This manga was conceived by Mr. Howin a week after the serialization meeting last month. In short, although Yoshida knew that what he was going to say next would make his colleagues on the monthly editorial side explode, there were some things that had to be said. After all, he was the editor-in-chief of the manga artist Howin Kyoma. From the time you conceived the idea to the time you finished 1 chapter, it only took Mr. Feng Guangyuan less than 3 weeks. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 454. Regarding the shocking facts, Yoshida said, after the editors of the monthly magazine recovered from the shock, most of them had expressions of disbelief on their faces and began to circulate the news about Phoenix Institute's sinister new work Hell Girl. However, when the manga manuscript was delivered to Toda, the editor-in-chief of the monthly magazine, it stopped. Toda, the new manga by Mr. Kuma from the Phoenix Institute, don't you want to read it? Seeing that Toda didn't seem to want to read the manga manuscript, the deputy editor in charge of presiding over the meeting said a little strangely, although I know you want to go to the hospital to visit Takeda-sensei now, but, the monthly serialization meeting is going on right now. As the monthly magazine editor who can participate in the monthly serialization meeting, you have the responsibility and obligation to watch the serialization meeting. Comic manuscript. No, deputy editor, it's not that I don't want to read the new comics of Mr. Kuma from the Phoenix Academy, it's just. After pondering for a moment, Toda stared at Yoshida with a gloomy face and asked angrily in a harsh tone. Yoshida, is this really okay for you? Toda, what you said is a bit excessive. Before Yoshida could speak, an editor on the editorial side of the monthly magazine complained dissatisfiedly, although as the editor-in-chief of the monthly magazine, I can understand your dissatisfaction with your cartoonists. You feel helpless when the comic is forced to suspend publication, but don't you think it's excessive to accuse others for no reason like this? Humph. Is it too much? Toda did not refute his colleague's accusation. Instead, he stared at Yoshida again and asked again in a serious tone, Yoshida, I think you understand what I am saying, right? I ask you once, do you think this is really good? Toda-kun, I understand what you mean. Yoshida finally got the chance to speak this time, before others on the editorial side of the monthly magazine were about to speak. Yoshida spread his hands towards Toda, with a look of helplessness on his face, said with some self-deprecation, in fact, at the beginning, I didn't believe that Chang could complete this new comic. After all, even a cartoonist like Chang, who is called a monster, wants to be able to complete this new comic in such a short period of time. It is basically impossible to complete a monthly comic series within the time limit. But Mr. Kuma from the Phoenix Institute has not only drawn it, but also submitted the new manga to the monthly serialization meeting. Although Toda tried his best to suppress his voice, Toda's colleagues on the editorial side of the monthly magazine heard that the lowered voice can still be called Roaring Roar. If this monthly serialization meeting determines that Hell Girl by Hohoin Kuma-sensei will be serialized as a new series, and that the manga White Rabbit Candy by Takeda-sensei has been confirmed to be replaced, Yoshida, and all my colleagues, I think you should know what this means, right? Carrying out double serialization in the monthly magazine, allowing cartoonists to complete the manga manuscripts required for 2 monthly serializations within 1 month. Toda didn't wait for his colleagues on the editorial side to reply, he slapped the table angrily and reprimanded loudly, Humph. No manga artist can do this. No manga artist can do it. So, if you let the manga Hell Girl by Mr. Kumane of the Phoenix Academy pass the serialization conference, it will eventually lead to the successor Takeda After Teacher. Another cartoonist's comics are on hiatus. Is this guy Toda really worried about Chang? Maybe we had a competitive and hostile relationship before, but now that we are also worried about Chang, Yoshida, who has already understood Toda's thoughts, has entered the silent mode. Toda-kun, what you said, isn't it too arbitrary? Although he agreed with Toda's statement, the deputy editor showed a disdainful smile. Compared to Takeda-sensei, the Phoenix Academy is really fierce. Isn't the teacher still very young? As a young man, you should work a little harder. Besides, if Mr. Kuma of the Phoenix Institute can complete the first chapter of Hell Girl in just 3 weeks, then he can do it. It's actually not that difficult to publish a monthly double series, right? And, by the way, is this guy really the deputy editor? Toda looked at the chatting deputy editor in astonishment, with a look of disbelief on his face. The deputy editor's calculation method sounds correct, but in practice there are many uncertain factors. To give the simplest example, for comics serialized in a monthly magazine, the cartoonist only needs to submit the comics to the editor once a month, but for comics serialized in a weekly magazine, the cartoonist has to submit comics drafts to the editor 4 times a month, but in fact, the difference between the two is there is no comparison at all. Because monthly serialized comics only need to complete 1 chapter, while weekly serialized comics need to complete 4 chapters, the design of comic plots, the presentation of characters, etc., all require cartoonists to spend time arranging and layout. Deputy editor, this is not a matter of young age. Toda looked at the deputy editor with an unfriendly look, and his tone was full of ridicule. What's more, deputy editor, don't forget, the cartoonist's in Makoto, but it's a combination of Hohoin Kuma and Shinzuma Eiji sensei, and according to the information provided by editor Yoshida, the plot of Railgun was completed by Hohoin Kuma sensei alone, so, It really counts. If you get up, Phoenix Academy Kayama-sensei will serialize 3 comics in the monthly magazine at the same time. This. People who can become deputy editors-in-chief can naturally hear the sarcasm in Toda's tone. Just like some leaders in a certain country, they can be incapable of doing work, but they must be able to take charge of the work of their subordinates. Toda-kun, although what you said sounds reasonable, but, since you are the editor-in-chief of the monthly magazine and have participated in the serialization meeting, then no matter which cartoonist submits the comic, you should not avoid reading it, right? You are derelict in your duty by doing this. There is a reason why I don't read Hell Girl by Hao Winkuma. Toda seemed to have known the deputy editor-in-chief's thoughts for a long time, and did not panic because of the deputy editor-in-chief's taking charge of the work accusation. Instead, he looked at the deputy editor-in-chief with a "I have seen through everything" look, and jokingly said, although this comic was completed by Hao Winkuma in 3 weeks, it makes people feel that the quality of this comic completed in such a short time may not be worth looking forward to, but Yoshida-kun still insisted on submitting this comic to the monthly serialization meeting. What does this mean? It means that for Yoshida, this comic called Hell Girl is more suitable for serialization than the previous White Rabbit Candy comic. So, the reason why I don't read this comic is very simple, because I am worried that once I read it, I can't help but want to let this comic pass the serialization meeting and go directly into serialization. But doing so will make Mr. Hao Winkuma. Toda pushed the comic manuscript to Yoshida, and said in a tone full of guilt and self-blame, because I was too impatient and wanted to succeed too much, I implicated my close friend Takeda. Teacher Hao Winkuma, maybe you can do what others can't do, maybe you will resent me because of the serialization. But this time, I didn't do this because I was worried about you, Mr. Hao Winkuma. Because this is a sin for me. So only this time. I will stop Mr. Hao Winkuma from serializing your comic no matter what. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 455. The monthly magazine by Sheng Junk will serialize White Rabbit Candy from the next issue, replacing the manga of Mr. Takeda, who had to take a break due to hospitalization. The manga Hell Girl submitted by the manga artist Hao Winkuma at the monthly serialization meeting will have to wait until the manga White Rabbit Candy is finished before it can be serialized. This is the final decision made by editor-in-chief Sasaki at the monthly serialization meeting. And this is also the content that Yoshida was responsible for conveying to Makoto Takahashi under the joint recommendation of the editors of the monthly magazine. What do you mean by "since Yoshida-kun is the editor of Mr. Hao Winkuma, then it is most appropriate for you to convey the decision of this monthly serialization meeting, those guys in the monthly editorial department?" Not only the gnashing of teeth and resentment when speaking, just observing Yoshida's face that seems to have begun to twist, you can feel the infinitely close to black resentment of the editor-in-chief of a certain weekly magazine. Yes, I am very familiar with the manga artist Hao Winkuma, and we have worked together as the editor-in-chief for many years, but is Aiken a person who can be easily persuaded? If he is so easy to persuade, will Aiken still propose a new series at this monthly serialization meeting? Recalling that when Makoto Takahashi heard that the manga White Rabbit Candy was only listed as a candidate for serialization, he immediately started to create a new manga on his own. Yoshida began to think about the possibility of persuading Makoto Takahashi later. I am afraid that when I tell Aiken the result of the serialization meeting, that crazy middle school manga artist will immediately launch a frenzied attack on me. It seems that this is really going to happen. Recalling the tragic black history of being tortured, teasing, and killed, taught, by Makoto Takahashi with a magic sword because he did not have enough knowledge of the manga completed by Makoto Takahashi and gave comments out of context, Yoshida began to worry whether he could still see the sunset tomorrow. Why don't we just call and tell Chang? No, 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 even if I can avoid being hurt today by calling, Chang's vengeful personality means that when he comes to collect the comic manuscript in a few days, I will definitely suffer double the damage. Drag Yojiro and Nyaizuma Eiji into this. No, 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 even if the decision-maker of the Ogawa Society was present, didn't Chang have no scruples at all? What's more, Nyaizuma Eiji is fine, but I have to meet Yujiro every day. I don't want my embarrassing appearance to be spread around by Yujiro, that big-mouthed guy. Yoshida had been thinking about countermeasures on the way here, but every time he came up with a good plan, it was quickly overturned by Yoshida himself. Should we say that contradictions are the root of human nature? No, 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 the correct statement should be that the editor-in-chief Yoshida, after years of special training by a certain Chuyuni cartoonist, has been deeply imprinted with the fear of a certain white-coated devilish and evil taste. As he got closer and closer to Takahashi Makoto's house, Yoshida, who was getting more and more anxious, could not think of a solution. When Yoshida's side was already able to see the house of a certain Chuyuni cartoonist, he suddenly had the feeling that this place seems to be very suitable for my burial place. However, just as truth always gives corresponding despair when giving people hope, fate always throws down the spider silk that can continue human hope when people are full of despair. In a sense, the so-called fate, compared to Takahashi Makoto, the crazy cartoonist Feng Guangayuan Kyoma, and white-faced demon Wiseman, is the real true devilish and unparalleled. For example, now, when Yoshida walked to the door of Takahashi Makoto's house, he met a person who should not be here. Toda-kun, seeing Toda's look of "I must have gone to the wrong place," Yoshida was a little confused and asked in confusion, "Why are you, wait, you are here to see Chang? No, you are here to see Hao Winkuma, right?" "Hey, Yoshida, at this time, should I say long time no see," Toda greeted him with a smile, nodded and admitted his purpose. "I came to see Hao Winkuma because..." "Hey, hey, hey, Toda, what do you want to do?" Yoshida interrupted Toda without any hesitation, looked at Toda with a vigilant face, and said with a somewhat unfriendly expression, "I can tell you, one thing, let's get back to the same thing. Don't think that in the previous serialization meeting. The reason I came here today has nothing to do with the monthly serialization meeting." Toda didn't want Yoshida to misunderstand, so he directly stated his purpose. "I just came to thank Mr. Hao Winkuma, that's all." Thank you." Hearing Toda's answer, Yoshida almost bit his tongue, looked at Toda with suspicion, and asked worriedly, "Toda-kun, are you sure you really came to thank Aiken, and not to deliberately make trouble?" "Hee, Yoshida-kun, do you have paranoia?" Like Yoshida, Toda also has the venomous tongue attribute on the monthly editor side. When Yoshida and Toda entered Takahashi Makoto's house together, a middle-level cartoonist was squatting on a chair and completing the manga manuscript seriously. Although Takahashi Makoto is finishing the manga manuscript with his head down at the moment and cannot see the expression on the face of a certain second-grade cartoonist, both Yoshida and Toda can deduce it when they see the manga manuscripts scattered around Takahashi Makoto. A certain middle-grade cartoonist has obviously not had a good rest recently. The elusive black-clad butler Sabas-chan, after serving delicious black tea and delicious pastries, gracefully bowed to the two of them and then entered the legendary divine hidden mode again, and it seemed that there was already Makoto Takahashi, who focused all his attention on the manga manuscript, had no intention of communicating with the two editors and continued to concentrate on completing the manga manuscript in front of him. Neither Yoshida nor Toda meant to disturb Makoto Takahashi, and the two editors, who were very professional, gave up talking after entering the door and directly communicated with eyes and gestures. This kind of weird the method of communication continued until Makoto Takahashi stopped painting. "Ahem, I already know your purpose of coming, tell me your wishes." Makoto Takahashi looked at the two editors who were having a silent exchange, rubbed his dry eyes. Remember, one person can only make one wish, and it cannot exceed the capabilities of His Majesty the fierce Demon King of the Phoenix Academy. So, weak humans, offer your sacrifices, then make a wish, and finally bring your wishes to me. Be afraid and leave. I mean Cheng. Yoshida, who was worried that Tota didn't know how to communicate correctly with Takahashi Makoto, spoke before Tota, about the new serial you proposed before. It's Hell Girl, that comic. I have no objection to the Commander-in-Chief's decision. Just when Yoshida was still thinking about how to persuade Takahashi Makoto took the initiative to say something that surprised Yoshida. So whether it is serializing White Rabbit First Sugar or serializing Hell Girl in the future, it doesn't matter anymore. Chen, why do you know? After Yoshida was stunned, he suddenly felt the long-lost feeling of powerlessness again, and murmured, before you failed me. The source of the news is not important. Makoto Takahashi looked at Yoshida with a smile, and said something that made Yoshida furious. What is important is that when you walked along the way in my cat, the kind of you want to say something about me, the complicated expression of giving up the dual monthly series but not knowing how to persuade me makes me feel quite happy. Ha 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 ha. Seeing that Takahashi Makoto was about to destroy Yoshida with just a few words, even though he covered his mouth and knew that he shouldn't laugh at this time, Tota couldn't help but make a sound that he shouldn't have made. Come. Uncle over there, I also know your purpose of coming. Makoto Takahashi did not continue to mock Yoshida, but instead changed the topic to Tota, who was snickering, so thank you is completely unnecessary. Said. I see. Tota suppressed his smile, with a look of surprise on his face. After I heard about that incident, I planned to tell Phoenix Academy Kumasama what you said as soon as possible, but now it seems that you have indeed communicated with Mr. Takeda, Mr. Kuma from the Phoenix Institute. I don't like bullying the weak, because that will only show my incompetence, because that will only expose my weakness. Makoto Takahashi stood up, straightening his wrinkled white coat, and said in a low tone, although I had to temporarily withdraw from the game due to injury, the collision of will and will, the battle between awareness and awareness, that is the really interesting thing. That's true, but Takeda-sensei still feels a little guilty. For me, as long as I can accomplish that, it is the best thank you gift. I understand. Tota stood up and bowed slightly to Takahashi Makoto before saying goodbye. Mr. Kumane from the Phoenix Institute, I will convey your words to Mr. Takeda. This is not scientific at all. Yoshida, who had remained silent until Tota left, seemed to have come back to his senses and couldn't help roaring, why can't I listen at all? I understand, Chen, what are you going to say to Tota-kun? By the way, what did you do yesterday? Tisk, stupid my familiar cat, it's hard to explain to you with your wisdom. Makoto Takahashi looked at Yoshida's unconvinced look and said angrily, yesterday I just talked to the Black Flame Wong, teamed up and went to the hospital to get a copy of Resident Evil /U0026 Silent Hill. Hospital, Yoshida quickly reacted after hearing Takahashi Makoto's prompt, Chen, you mean, could it be? I'm sorry to say that the rest time is over. The time wasted yesterday, but I have to make up for it today. Makoto Takahashi did not answer Yoshida's words, but sat on the chair to himself, forcing he raised his eyes and said in a serious tone, so. Crazy cartoonist mode, projection starts. Ahem, I'm sorry, dear readers, I was on a business trip 2 days ago and didn't come back until 10 o'clock tonight. Because it was a last-minute decision, I was not informed in time. A certain cat said very sorry. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 456. Shizuka-kun, it looks like the performance of Jean is pretty good this time. A certain little animal exiled by Makoto Takahashi, no, it should be Miss Ueno Aoi, who used to be Makoto Takahashi's assistant. At this moment, while flipping through the comic in her hand, she expressed her feelings about the comic genre that she and Shizuka had completed together. Although after completing the comic manuscript, I read it over and over again to confirm whether there were any problems with the comic manuscript, but now that I have seen it serialized in the monthly magazine, I suddenly feel a little moved. Yeah. Mayuri feels the same way. Mayuri squinted her eyes and spread her hands. It feels like hugging a big doll. I'm very happy. Shizuka, who was observing the monthly magazine that serialized the first episode of Jean, was as silent as ever. No, Shizuka was not a talkative person. After the monthly magazine published the manga Jean by the cartoonist Jinghe River was released, most readers gave it very good reviews. It is said that this was the news fed back to Jinghe River by someone who became the editor-in-chief of the cartoonist Jinghe River within a week after the monthly magazine was released. If it were an ordinary cartoonist, he might be very encouraged after hearing this news, and he would be more motivated to complete the cartoon manuscript in the next period of time. However, Jinghe River is not an ordinary cartoonist. After receiving the information that his comic genre was well received from the excited tone of his editor-in-chief, Jinghe River just said oh and hung up the phone of his editor-in-chief, because in the same issue of the monthly magazine, only the cartoonist Shinkai Makoto's cartoon appeared, and the cartoonist Feng Guangyuan Kima's cartoon did not appear. Of course, the overly excited editor-in-chief of Shizukawa seemed to have forgotten to tell Shizukawa that at the monthly serialization meeting, it had been decided that the comic White Rabbit Candy by Howin Kuma would be published in the next issue of the monthly magazine. But I have to say, did Makoto and that Nazuma Eiji really complete the comic A Certain Scientific Railgun together? Miss Ueno Aoi flipped through the monthly magazine with an incomprehensible look on her face. Just by observing the current comics, I can't feel that this is completed by two cartoonists. This is simply completed by one person. Regarding this point, I heard Mr. Howin mentioned it before, saying that the first episode of this comic was completed by Mr. Nazuma Eiji. Shizukawa did not remain silent about Ueno Aoi's doubts, but instead explained to his assistant, and Mr. Howin also said that the model of cartoonist Makoto Shinkai is different from that of Ajuki Ome. Shiraki Yumha was written by Takagi and completed by Mashiro. However, it was not the case for Shinkai Makoto. The script was basically written by Howin alone, while the comic was written by Eiji Nazuma and Howin respectively. The Madoka Magica that was published in the weekly magazine was completed in this way. Of course I know this, but how should I put it? Miss Ueno Aoi put down the monthly magazine and looked at Shizukawa with some doubts. Logically speaking, if two cartoonists work together to complete the comic, it should be easy to mess up, right? I remember that when Madoka Magica was first serialized, there seemed to be such a scene. But later, the two teachers adjusted it, and it was basically not noticeable. Shizukawa naturally understood what Miss Ueno Aoi wanted to say, and took the initiative to take over the topic. Not to mention, Shizukawa's tone of voice revealed a strong admiration. Two genius-level teachers, even if they take such a cooperation that goes beyond common sense, it still makes people feel amazing. Yes, I also think that being able to do that is amazing, but this time, the situation is a little different. Miss Ueno Aoi quickly flipped through the comics of A Certain Scientific Railgun, with a hint of worry in her tone. In the weekly serialized Madoka Magica, there are not many characters that appear, and the serialized content is not very much, so with the comic skills of Aiken or Naizuma Eiji, it is not a very difficult thing to imitate each other's style and continue to the end of the comics, but this time, A Certain Scientific Railgun, from the foreshadowing of the first episode, from the perspective of the characters that will appear in the comics in the future and the length of the comics, it is much more complicated than Madoka. So, are you worried that with the long-term serialization of A Certain Scientific Railgun, the different styles of drawing between Mr. Howin and Mr. Eiji Nazuma will affect the level of the comics? I won't worry about such things. I am your assistant now, Mr. Shizuka. I won't worry about Aiken and the others, even though she has gotten rid of her identity as the assistant of the cartoonist Hao Winkuma. Miss Wenoaoi's tsundere nature cannot be changed. This is probably the best textbook interpretation of it's easy to change a country, but it's hard to change one's nature. Hey, having worked with Miss Wenoaoi for a while, Shizuka will naturally not be like a certain second-year cartoonist who said something like this is the exclusive tsundere of small animals when Miss Wenoaoi made a tsundere declaration. So, as long as we keep serializing Zan at the current level, and wait until a certain scientific railgun has problems after being serialized for a while, we will be able to surpass the Makoto Shinkai formed by Makoto and Eiji Nizuma. After being arrogant, Miss Wenoaoi immediately issued a declaration that read as Victory Declaration and written as Death Flag. Shizukawa did not respond to the words of her assistant Miss Wenoaoi. Since even Miss Wenoaoi can see the problem of Makoto Shinkai, then both Makoto Takahashi and Eiji Nizuma will naturally be aware of this problem. Therefore, the opportunity to succeed will be given on the premise that the competitor makes a mistake. Shizukawa is not optimistic to the point of being heartless. Since these two cartoonists, who are known as geniuses, dare to choose this method to serialize comics in weekly and monthly magazines, they must have a way to solve this problem. Shizukawa doesn't know how Makoto Shinkai will solve this problem, but Shizukawa has a hunch that the scene that Miss Wenoaoi encountered, the scene where the manga A Certain Scientific Railgun failed due to the different styles of the two cartoonists, will never happen. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 457. Writing this, I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. The manga Clannad that was serialized in the monthly magazine by the manga artist Shoin Kuma can be said to be of a very brutal level. At least from the beginning of the serialization until the completion of the manga, there are almost no comics by any manga artist in the monthly magazine that can be compared. Competing with it has completely formed the so-called one family dominates situation. However, such achievements and situations can only appear in monthly magazines, but they will not appear in weekly magazines at all. Because, compared to monthly magazines, competition among cartoonists who serialize in weekly magazines is more intense. Eiji Arizuma and Makoto Takahashi had been able to continuously occupy the first place in the manga rankings based on reader surveys for a period of time. However, such results did not mean that their achievements in comics had reached their peak. Being able to dominate the weekly, not to mention the senior cartoonists who have been famous for a long time, there are several cartoonists who debuted around the same time as the two. Although from the current stage, they are lagging behind and there is a certain gap, but the backward part can be made up through hard work, and the gap can also be recovered bit by bit through accumulation. Through each serialization of the weekly, you can discover your own problems and hone your skills. The so-called talent or talent may give people some advantages, but only true and continuous hard work can turn this so-called advantage into an opportunity for victory. And this is also the fairest rule in this unfair world. To put it simply, the cartoonist Hohoin Kuma, who was once famous in the weekly magazine and serialized 3 comics at the same time in the weekly magazine, has been focusing on the monthly magazine recently. Therefore, compared to several cartoonists who are also serializing in weekly magazines, it is natural to shorten the gap or even be overtaken by others who have been working hard. At least, things are not going very well with the recent manga Dream Eater by Mangaka Shoin. This comic origin is Arjo Mumenha's gay daily life. When it was first serialized, it once amazed readers. With the eye-catching setting of dream and promise and the comic style that fits the theme of the weekly Shounen Jump, it has indeed resonated with many readers, at least for a long time after the comic was serialized. For a period of time, both weekly and monthly magazines have received many more submissions from new cartoonists than before. However, compared to several cartoonists who are working hard in the weekly, this level is certainly not enough. Eiji Niizuma was better off, although he was teamed up with Makoto Takahashi as Shinkai Makoto as an ally and started to write monthly copies, which wasted a lot of time and caused his manga ranking to drop, but Eiji Niizuma can at least hold his own and keep the comics he serializes in the weekly from falling out of the top 5. However, the manga Dream Eater by cartoonist Hohoin's Fierce manga fell down to the 11th place in last week's weekly manga ranking results. 11th place, holding the manga ranking statistics sheet in his hand, Yoshida had a complicated look on his face. Although Yoshida also knew that the focus of Makoto Takahashi's work during this period was basically around the several comics serialized in the monthly magazine, but the performance of the weekly comic series dropped, and it fell directly to the 11th position, which still made it difficult for him to do so. Yoshida was a little surprised. "Hey, Yoshida, your expression right now is really annoying." Hearing the unwillingness in Yoshida's complaining tone, editor Aida, who happened to be passing by, complained angrily, "The 11th place result is not good enough. Aren't you satisfied enough? You know, the comic I was responsible for was cut in half at the previous serialization meeting." Although the performance of the comic Dream Eater has dropped, which makes Yoshida unhappy, but compared to Aida, who was responsible for the comic being cut in half, the situation is indeed much better. Seeing Aida's expression of "you're not satisfied with this achievement and might even go berserk at any time," Yoshida explained awkwardly, "Are you dissatisfied? Maybe it's my expectations for Aiken. No, I should say, is it too demanding? Isn't this natural?" Ongtian's anger was not relieved and vented, but instead increased even faster. After all, Phoenix Academy teacher can achieve such results in a weekly series while being double serialized in a monthly magazine. He is already quite a monster. For a Phoenix Academy teacher who can achieve such a level of success, what else do you have to be dissatisfied with? By the way, Yoshida, have you narrowed your vision because you have been dealing with the monthly editorial department recently? Well, maybe, that's about it. Yoshida naturally heard the implication of editor Aida's words. Although the cartoonist Phoenix Ingenuity is said to be able to achieve the result of crushing all serial cartoonists in the same period in the monthly magazine, such results are completely impossible to replicate for the fiercely competitive weekly magazine. After all, cartoonists who serialize comics in monthly magazines, although the number of comics they complete every time is far more than the content of comics serialized in weekly magazines, from a time perspective, they only need to conceive one chapter of comics a month. The plot and thinking time lasted for a month. However, for cartoonists who serialize in weekly magazines, the most scarce thing is time. Submitting a comic draft every week, although the number of comic drafts is far less than that of a monthly serialized comic, the same, whether it is the time for thinking or the time for completing the comic draft, is quite tight. Many weekly serialized cartoonists cannot bear the fast-paced serialization under the weekly serialization mode, and the comic performance is getting worse and worse, and even ends up being cut in half. Perhaps the reason for the decline in the performance of the comic Dream Eater at this stage is that Ah Cheng is busy with the monthly serialization, which makes the thinking time too hasty. Huh? My cat, people like you can only be mortals after all. After hearing Yoshida's doubts, Takahashi Makoto did not surprise Yoshida and began to enter the sneer and ridicule mode. Huh? You actually said something as stupid as the decline in comics results is due to insufficient thinking time. Isn't that so? Yoshida interpreted Takahashi Makoto's sarcastic performance as a certain Chuyunabaku manga artist was angry after the truth was revealed, and interrupted Takahashi Makoto without any hesitation, although I also think that this is a bit too much, but Cheng, that's the fact. Of course, I don't want to blame you for anything. After all, with the results you have achieved in the monthly magazine, the decline in the weekly serialized comic Dream Eater is actually not a big problem. And it just fell from 9th to 11th. There is only one reason for the decline in comics results. Takahashi Makoto quickly counterattacked Yoshida's rude behavior of interrupting him through the Murong family's secret. Give him what he wants. It's just because I'm not strong enough. Not strong enough, Just like Wanchinj, Yoshida found it difficult to understand the thinking mode of a certain Chuyunibaku manga artist at the first time. Humans always try their best to find all kinds of excuses for their failures to alleviate their inner guilt and sense of guilt. For example, they attribute the reason for their unsatisfactory test scores to their bad condition on the test day. For example, they attribute the reason for their inability to do certain things to being too tired. For example, they attribute the reason for their failure to some other reasons. Tisk, humans are really hypocritical. Takahashi Makoto shook his head with some disdain, looked at Yoshida with a serious face, and said righteously, "But I, as a crazy cartoonist, Fengguangai Yuankuma, disdain to be as hypocritical as humans. The reason why I failed is always only one, that is because I am not strong enough." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 458. Taiwanese novel website rightward. What the hell is this? Yoshida seemed to have walked into the wrong door, standing at the door and refusing to enter Takahashi Makoto's house. He looked at Rina, who was smiling bitterly, with a puzzled look on his face, and asked suspiciously, "Rina-chan, what does Makoto want to do today?" "Improve your strength, Makoto-kun told me so before." Rina, a big star who is used to big scenes, is a little confused about her husband's weird and strange behavior at this moment. Makoto-kun said that this is the fastest way to improve your strength. Let me explain this point. After Sebastian offered Yoshida the black tea, he bowed slightly, and his face still maintained that unpleasant expression with a moderate smile. According to the young master, among all the methods of improving strength, this method is said to be the most effective and the most efficient one. Lie, right? How can this be called improving strength? It can't be, but that's not right. You are still wearing a white coat at this time, you should at least change clothes or something, right? I don't know where to start complaining. Yoshida pulled his hair a little madly, and asked unwillingly, also, what the hell does this situation have to do with improving strength? The reason why Yoshida couldn't complain was very simple, because the current situation has completely exceeded the understanding of Yoshida, a senior editor-in-chief. Previously, Takahashi Makoto told Yoshida that the reason for the decline in the performance of his comic Dream Eater was due to his lack of strength. Then Takahashi Makoto kindly reminded Yoshida that in order to improve his strength, he would take some special actions. According to Yoshida's understanding, if a cartoonist wants to improve his strength, it is very likely that he will find a way to improve his painting skills or find a way to improve his ability to grasp the plot of the comics. In short, it means spending time thinking about the plot of the comics and honing his painting skills. Although the methods mentioned above can indeed improve the strength of cartoonists, these are not things that can be effective in the short term. What's more, Takahashi Makoto is now serializing in a monthly magazine while serializing in a weekly magazine. A certain Chuyuni cartoonist who serializes 3 comics at the same time can complete the corresponding comic manuscripts before the deadline, which is already very good. Does he still have the mind and time to think about the plot of the comics and hone his painting skills? Because he was worried that Makoto Takahashi would be overworked because of the pressure to improve his strength, Yoshida came to Makoto Takahashi's house early this morning after tossing and turning all night to see if Makoto Takahashi's so-called strength improvement method would affect Makoto Takahashi's rest. If Makoto Takahashi really planned to spend his precious rest time constantly drawing or something, Yoshida said that he would rather let Makoto Takahashi's serialized comics have such bad performance that they were forced to be cut off, and he would also dissuade Makoto Takahashi from such desperate behavior. In Yoshida's imagination, after entering Makoto Takahashi's house, the first thing he would see should be the many comic manuscripts scattered on the ground, which is direct evidence of a certain middle school cartoonist staying up late to draw. then he should see a certain middle school cartoonist with dark circles under his eyes and a tired face, holding the brush in his trembling hands, still unwilling to rest and drawing on the manuscript paper, finally. But when Yoshida arrived at Makoto Takahashi's house, the scene he saw was somewhat, no, it should be said that it was completely different from what he expected. Yoshida imagined that he should be a middle school manga artist with a tired face, but now he is sitting cross-legged on a chair with a lively look, and a cat and a dog are lying quietly opposite him. On the desk where he used to complete the comic manuscript, there is now an incense burner, and the burning incense creates a misty environment. "Oh, my cat, you are here." Takahashi Makoto looked at Yoshida, who was complaining to Rina and Sebastian, and did not taunt and attract hatred as usual. Instead, he greeted with a smile, and then continued his, special skills of improving strength to the crawling cat and dog. Then Pavlov and Schrödinger, let's continue. The way of heaven is to reduce the surplus and make up for the deficiency. All living beings in the world are the way, but living beings in the world cannot prove the way with their bodies. Sure enough. Yoshida's mouth began to twitch. Takahashi Makoto's behavior of talking about the way to the cat and the dog lasted for a whole morning, and in contrast, Yoshida's mouth twitched for a whole morning. What the hell is this special skill called strength enhancement? What the hell can improve strength? It's just a waste of time, isn't it? My cat, as expected, your realm has not reached that level yet, so it's natural that you don't understand. Before Yoshida, whose face was full of doubts and anger, exploded, Takahashi Makoto shook his head gently, and said with a slightly regretful tone, as a primate, you have listened for a whole morning, but you haven't gained as much as Ding-chun and Liulai, alas. My cat, even though you are a human, your comprehension is too poor, right? What does this have to do with comprehension? Yoshida really wanted to pull Takahashi Makoto's collar and activate the collar-pulling roar skill. However, when he thought that there was not only Takahashi Makoto, who was much more powerful than himself, but also a rumored extremely black-bellied butler, Yoshida could only fantasize in his heart. By the way, Chang, you spent a whole morning, what exactly do you want to do? Of course it's the legendary discussion on Taoism. Makoto Takahashi looked at Yoshida with some sympathy, but his tone of voice was full of ridicule and disdain. My beloved cat, I will do it for you, shame on my superficial knowledge. Yoshida vaguely heard about Takahashi Makoto's statement, but it is said that this kind of thing seems to be something that immortals and others would do in the mythology of Zhongzhou, right? And, Yoshida looked at Makoto Takahashi with a somewhat unkind look. By the way, does this have anything to do with you improving your strength? Regarding the special techniques of improving strength, among the methods I know, enlightenment is the most effective and fastest way, Makoto Takahashi said matter-of-factly. Discuss Tao with all living creatures, it is helpful to understand Tao. This is, Tisk, my companion is a cat, these are common sense contents, you can read some books when you have time. After a brief silence, Yoshida finally burst out the anger that had been brewing for a long time. What kind of common sense is this? Takahashi Makoto, you are a cartoonist. A cartoonist. The way for a cartoonist to improve his strength is not to draw more cartoons and think about the plot. Enlightenment. Understand your sister's way. One is all is one. Hey, this is not what you are talking about Tao at all. This is a line from Steel. Don't forget that I am your editor in charge. Alas. My beloved is a cat, haven't you understood yet? The Tao of heaven is impermanent, and all laws are Tao. Whether it's perception, painting, or even alchemy, they're all actually a type of Tao. A Cheng, you are a cartoonist. A mere cat of mine who doesn't even understand Tao actually dares to talk about Tao with the great majesty of the Phoenix Academy. You really overestimate your ability. So the result is obvious, Yoshida is completely defeated. Hey. It took a lot of time, My beloved cat, you are indeed the undercover sent by the organization, right? Makoto Takahashi finally let Yoshida go. No, the correct way to say it is, because Makoto Takahashi will still I have other things to do, so I don't want to spend any more time on Yoshida. Although he had been beaten by Makoto Takahashi and was squatting in the corner drawing circles, Yoshida was still paying attention to Makoto Takahashi's every move. Watching Makoto Takahashi pull out a previously published weekly magazine Shounen Jump from the bookshelf, Yoshida was still a little confused about what Makoto Takahashi wanted to do, but when Makoto Takahashi opened the weekly magazine, he began to copy the previous serials by Eiji Shinzuma. After reading the manga, Yoshida had some vague speculations. "Chen, what are you? Huh? My familiar cat, I have achieved this level, and you still don't understand." Makoto Takahashi began to copy the comics while replying to Yoshida with disdain. "This is also a way to improve your strength. And if you don't fully master the fusion skill, you can't eliminate the so-called hidden dangers. Ahem, writing novels is also a kind of Tao, and coding is also a kind. So dear readers, maybe one day a cat will soar after writing it." A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Mao. Chapter 459. The two comics White Rabbit Candy and A Certain Scientific Railgun in the monthly magazine, plus Dream Eater in the weekly magazine. It sounds like there are only 3 comics that need to be completed, but the number of comics that actually need to be completed is still quite scary. At least the few people on the cartoonist side who regard Takahashi Makoto as a competitor were really scared after hearing this news. After learning about this, the cartoonists on the cartoonist side who have a good relationship with Takahashi Makoto expressed their concerns about what Takahashi Makoto did. Especially the cartoonist Ashiro Mumanai, who once serialized in both the monthly and weekly magazines, knows very well how hard it is to serialize 2 monthly comics and 1 weekly comic at the same time. The silver-haired brother Fukuda, the initiator of the Fukuda group, invited everyone on the cartoonist side to form a team to brush the super god legend Phoenix Court Kuma Great Demon King copy. No, it is to invite everyone to observe a certain middle school cartoonist who serializes 3 comics at the same time. The reason why the cartoonists were invited to Takahashi Makoto this time was not only to observe the crazy behavior of a certain Chuyuni cartoonist up close, but also to see if Takahashi Makoto could withstand such a high-intensity serialization. In short, after hearing the news, the silver-haired brother Fukuda was surprised by Takahashi Makoto's behavior at first, and then began to worry about a certain Chuyuni cartoonist. So even though the silver-haired brother Fukuda didn't say so, the relationship between the cartoonists and the both friends and competitors, plus the long-term use of comics as agents to fight in weekly magazines, the cartoonists still understand it in their hearts, so the idea of forming a team quickly received the response of the cartoonists. So after agreeing on a time, the cartoonists who had formed a team started to head towards Takahashi Makoto's house. Tisk, to this extent, Aiken is really hard-working, although he said so. Fukuda, a silver-haired boy with a bad boy's face, still showed the arrogance of a man who is hard on the outside but soft on the inside. But as a member of Fukuda's team, I don't want Aiken to fall down because of working too hard, so what do you say? You know, there was a time when the deadlines happened to collide. Akito and I, plus 3 assistants, worked all night for 3 consecutive days to complete the comics of 2 comics. Landai, who had also tried monthly and weekly dual serialization, he said to his best friend and everyone with an ugly face, 3 comics are serialized at the same time, only a non-human like Makoto can do such a thing, right? The correct statement should be 2 comics. Mr. Huangmao looked at Eiji Shinkai, who was walking in a very strange posture, and pushed his glasses to correct his best friend's statement. After all, the cartoonist Makoto Shinkai is composed of Makoto and Eiji. If you really count it, the comic A Certain Scientific Railgun is actually written by Eiji and Makoto. That's not the case. Mr. Howin is indeed serializing 3 comics now. AG Shinkai turned around and said to everyone while backing away to explain, although the manga artist Makoto Shinkai is a fictional manga artist composed of me and Howin, the plot of the entire A Certain Scientific Railgun manga was completed by Howin alone, and except for the first chapter of this manga, which was completed by me, the content of the subsequent monthly serialization will be completed by Howin. The manga I was responsible for completing started from the meeting between Kamijutuma and Index. Huh? Is that so? The man with yellow hair and glasses looked at Eiji Niizuma in disbelief. Let's not talk about the question of how many manga Makoto serialized at the same time. Eiji, no, Mr. Niizuma, you just said that the plot of the manga A Certain Scientific Railgun all of them were completed by Cheng alone, which means that Cheng has finished writing the plot of the manga A Certain Scientific Railgun. It should not be finished yet. Eiji Niizuma recalled the script that Makoto Takahashi had sent to him before, and shook his head with some regret. The plot provided by Mr. Feng Guangaiyuan only goes up to the day of Gakuen City Day Star Festival. According to the plot background provided by Mr. Feng Guangaiyuan before, it is estimated that these contents have not reached half of the content of the whole plot. For what Eiji Niizuma said about Gakuen City Day Star Festival, everyone expressed that they did not understand it at all. After all, this manga has only serialized the content of the first episode. So the cartoonist had no idea about what Eiji Niizuma said, so he did not express too much surprise. Of course, the witty yellow-haired glasses man, after a brief contemplation, asked Eiji Niizuma something that surprised everyone in the way of secretly crossing Chen Kang. So, Mr. Nizuma, according to what you and Chen did before, how long will it take for the part of the comic you are responsible for to be officially published in the monthly magazine? Well, although I also hope to start serialization as soon as possible, the decision is still in the hands of Mr. Howin. Nizuma Eiji pouted with some dissatisfaction, and gave the so-called spoilers to the cartoonists without caring. According to the plot provided by Mr. Howin, it seems that the part I am responsible for can only be serialized after the plot of Fantasy Hand is finished. Should I say you are worthy of being God? Serializing 3 comics at the same time. The little otter, who was listening to the cartoonists talking about Makoto Takahashi's great achievement of serializing 3 comics at the same time, suddenly turned pale after a brief empathy, covered his chest with one hand, and an assistant covered his mouth, and bent over to make a seriously ill look. If it were me, I would have died. I would definitely die. I'm already under a lot of pressure after getting married, not to mention serializing comics. I've started to suffer from insomnia at night recently, and the doctor said that if I continue like this, I will suffer from neurasthenia. Ahaha, Mr. Hiramaru is still as lazy as ever. The silver-haired boy Fukuda patted the little otter's shoulder hard, and made fun of him in a joking tone. If editor Yoshida knew about this, Mr. Hiramaru, you will have a hard time in the next period of time, hee. Along the way, the topics discussed by the cartoonists were basically related to Makoto Takahashi. Of course, the cartoonists seemed to have a tacit understanding and did not talk about the current status of their cartoons, nor did they talk about the ranking of cartoons that the cartoonists cared about very much. The reason why they did not talk about these things was because the cartoonists knew that the focus of a certain Chuyuni cartoonist seemed to be on the monthly serialization. After all, the cartoonists of the Fukuda group are not only partners, but also competitors. So if the competition for serialized cartoons in the weekly magazine lacks a certain Chuyuni cartoonist, it will become very boring. Dear readers, please rest early. Although a certain cat is updated late, it can be read the next day. Health is important. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 460. Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. The Fukuda group team composed of manga artist Fang has arrived at the entrance to the dungeon of Super God Legend, the fierce demon king of Phoenix Academy. According to a certain game setting of you will die if you don't reach the 100th floor. If you want to start the final battle, the first thing you have to do is to break the barrier and awaken the sleeping mission target, the fierce demon king of the Phoenix Academy. As the captain of the Fukuda group team, the silver-haired boy Fukuda with the appearance of a delinquent stood at the front of the team, preparing to knock on the door of Takahashi Makoto's house. However, before the silver-haired boy Fukuda knocked on the door, the little sea otter who is responsible for being cute in the team is feeling timid. Fukuda-kun, why don't you contact the god of the Phoenix Academy in advance? Of course, the little sea otter couldn't directly say let's go back, which sounds very cowardly and is very cowardly in practice, but it is very euphemistic. He also expressed his concerns to Fusion in a very forward-looking manner. What if, the Lord of the Phoenix Academy is not at home? Huh? Mr. Hiramaru, what are you thinking about? Although I didn't tell Cheng that we were coming before, I can be sure that that guy is definitely at home. The silver-haired boy Fukuda just raised his voice, which made the little sea otter turn pale with fright and take a few steps back. Sure enough, a human with the appearance of a bad boy can release a pressure similar to that of the fantasy species dragon by slightly raising his volume when speaking. Mr. Fusion, haven't you contacted Chen before? After hearing the words of the silver-haired brother Fusion, Yachin Mumanjai's good friend looked at each other, and at the same time, he had an unknown premonition. Hey! Do you still need to contact us for this kind of thing? Let's not talk about the comic serialized in the weekly, you know, that guy Aiken. Starting from next month, he will have a double monthly series. He curled his lips in displeasure again. The silver-haired boy Fukuda explained to his so-called teammates in a rather resentful tone, I don't know how long it usually takes you to complete a weekly manga series, but it will take me at least 4 days, so what do you think? What else can that guy like Cheng do now besides stay at home and draw comics? But, our sudden visit like this, won't it disturb Cheng? The yellow-haired glasses man put forward his doubts to the point. Hey! That kind of thing is not important at all. The silver-haired guy seemed too lazy to explain to everyone. No, the correct way to say it is that the silver-haired guy Fukuda seemed to have started the Tsundere man mode. I'm just a little worried. No, I just want to know whether Aiken, as rumored by the editorial department, can keep drawing comics without eating or sleeping. Of course, you can also take the opportunity to inquire about the enemy's situation and see Aiken is that guy really focusing on the monthly magazine. Oh! The war horn has begun to sound. Everyone is ready to attack. Eiji Nyaizuma, who did not participate in the discussion at all, completely ignored everyone's expressions and walked forward quickly, preparing to knock on the door. However, Eiji Nyaizuma's hand knocking on the door suddenly stopped, because the strange voice of a certain middle-class manga artist suddenly came from the room. Whoa! Yeah, that's what the railgun says. Oh ho ho ho. The girl with straight black hair says it so lovingly. Say it with more scenes. The lowly girl is so cute. Oh, and she said it very lovingly like a slut. Silence appeared in situations that should not have appeared. Some cartoonists will make weird noises when completing comics, such as Eiji Nyaizuma, Eiji Nyaizuma, Eiji Nyaizuma, Eiji Nyaizuma. Everyone around the cartoonist is still very familiar with this kind of thing. I understand, after all, only after possessing the so-called quirk can humans evolve from mortal skeletal ants into legendary geniuses. But no one in the manga community has ever heard that a certain middle-class manga artist actually behaves similarly to Eiji Izuma. Guo, it's true, that guy Aiken, silver-haired brother Fukuda-kun, what's the matter with that brief silence before you spoke? And, by the way, don't look at Eiji Shinzuma-san with this congratulations on finding your long-lost brother look. Makoto Takahashi and his new wife Eiji are definitely not long-lost brothers. This is classmate Landai, who once served as Eiji Nyaizuma's assistant, looked at Eiji Niizuma with a somewhat uncomfortable expression, and decisively reached out to cover his face covered with black lines. God, although he still didn't know what was happening in the house, the little sea otter couldn't help but tremble at the moment. The instinct of his body was roaring and shouting, telling him to get out of this dangerous place as soon as possible. Oh, I see, this is what the Phoenix Academy teacher once told me. Eiji Niizuma squinted his eyes and listened for a moment, with a look of understanding and expectation on his face. After all, as an ally of Makoto Takahashi, Eiji Arizuma has information about the manga artist that no one else knows. The door was opened strangely. The one who opened the door was not the smiling butler in black, but Haru Pavlov, Takahashi Makoto's most trusted and most powerful general. Everyone on the manga side knows that the domesticated cats and dogs in Takahashi Makoto's family are not just pets, but creatures with extremely high intelligence and commanding abilities. In a sense, if it weren't for Sadaharu Kazuo, if Liuli couldn't use magic power, she might have been classified as a monster, Kauya. A mess. Under the leadership of the silver-haired brother Fukuda, everyone on the cartoonist side quietly followed Ding Chun into the living room. This is what they saw. Comic manuscripts scattered on the ground, drawing tools scattered on the table. If they hadn't seen Makoto Takahashi squatting on a chair and concentrating on drawing, the people next to the cartoonist might have thought that there was another team before him. I just finished the copy of Legend of the Super God, the Fierce Demon King of the Phoenix Academy. Oh, are you here already? Even though I'm very dissatisfied after waiting for a long time, Phoenix Academy Kuma still tried his best to pretend to be welcoming and say hello to everyone. Makoto Takahashi did not stop painting, but opened the long-awaited painting in the Misaka sister mode. She spoke in a very plain and mechanical tone. The time is just right to serve as a tester of the new cuisine. Phoenix Academy Ojima's behavior of automatically sending the experimental mice to the door, said it in a very pleasant and welcoming tone. Oh. Is this the way the Misaka sisters talk? Mr. Phoenix Academy, thank you very much. Rather than saying that Eiji Niizuma didn't care at all, it's better to say that Eiji Niizuma seemed to like Takahashi Makoto's weird way of talking. To be able to think of Sister Misaka's setting at the first time, should we say that the King of Black Flame is worthy of being a fierce ally of the Phoenix Academy? Regarding the overly excited attitude of the King of Black Flame, Phoenix Institute Fierce Man said happily, even though he felt a little unhappy. Phoenix Institute Fierce Man still tried his best to pretend to be happy, although Takahashi Makoto said that he was very happy, but that there was no fluctuation in the tone, and it sounded completely the same as before. So for the next dark cooking experiment, the King of Black Flame will get a chance to taste immunity. Phoenix Academy. Ojima said very unpleasantly. Dark cuisine? Oh, I'm really looking forward to that. Then, except for Eiji Niizuma, who can communicate with Makoto Takahashi without any barriers, everyone on the manga side fell into silence. Oh, aren't these the comics I serialized before? Why, Mr. Phoenix Institute. The sharp-eyed Niizuma Eiji suddenly discovered his serialized comics, and curiously turned aside the manga manuscript on the desk. Mr. Phoenix Institute, are you copying my comics? Takahashi Cheng opened his mouth, originally wanting to explain something, but no words came out. Hey, Cheng, your face looks a little bad. Noticing that Takahashi Cheng's face was a little pale, Landai recalled his own experience and whispered to his good friend with some worry, Cheng, could it be Tisk, starting the fourth stage of simulating the behavior of the Black Flame King? Can it only last for half an hour? Huh. The human body is really fragile. Makoto Takahashi suddenly started to complain with disgust on his face, and the way he speaks seems to be back to normal. I don't even know where to start complaining. The man with yellow hair and glasses put on a horse face and whispered to his good friend. Speaking of Cheng, did you know we were coming? The silver-haired boy Fukuda was a little surprised. After all, Today's action pattern was purely improvised, but thinking back to the conversation just now, it seemed that a certain middle-class cartoonist had already. Did you know that the person you were waiting for would come? Well, in order to prevent people with bad intentions, I built a huge detection barrier, so when you get off the bus from the station, I already know it. As for the method of investigation, dear friends, do you still remember the tragic experience of editor Yoshida? Ahem, let me ask first, which Taoist friend will survive the tribulation tonight? By the way, didn't it fail yesterday? Looking at the lightning and thunder today that are more ferocious than yesterday, I can tell that the unknown Taoist friend has been wiped out in ashes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 461. Each cartoonist may be able to draw works in different styles, but even so, in the process of completing the cartoonist will more or less handle some scenes in his own usual way. This is the so-called cartoonist style. For example, Yachin Mumenjai, who is good at evil way cartoons, has completed and serialized several cartoons so far. Although the themes are different, if you observe carefully, you can still find that there are many similarities between these cartoons. Ahem, the similarities mentioned here, of course, refer to the image of the heroine in Yachin Mumenjai's cartoons who looks like a voice actor's sister, but refer to the handling of certain details. To give a simple example, in the cartoons serialized by Yachin Mumenjai, there are rarely fighting scenes between characters, that is, the so-called fist-to-flesh kind of hot fighting scenes. It's not that he is not good at handling fighting scenes, but Yachin Mumenjai's handling of fighting scenes in cartoons is different from the general Kingly Way cartoons. After all, the cartoonist Yachin Mumenjai's cartoons belong to Evil Way. In the same way, Eiji Niizuma also has his own unique style. The reason why Makoto Takahashi spent time copying Eiji Niizuma's comics during the busy serialization period was that he wanted to find some of Eiji Niizuma's style through copying again and again, and then try to adapt to it, so as to solve the problem of conflict in the style of a certain scientific railgun in the future. Although this is correct in theory, after practicing it, Makoto Takahashi found that this problem is quite difficult to deal with. It was the same scene of Misaka Mikoto performing the certain scientific railgun, and he and Eiji Niizuma also observed the real a certain scientific railgun launch and was shocked to sleep. Makoto Takahashi even watched the animation scene of a certain scientific railgun, but when Makoto Takahashi began to copy the last shocking scene of a certain scientific railgun, he found that no matter how he drew, he could not achieve the effect achieved by Eiji Niizuma. Compared with a true genius like Eiji Niizuma, what does it matter if he has a cheat code? What does it matter if he has a demon-like drawing speed? Lack of experience can be compensated by continuous hard work, but what about the gap in talent? This is not something that can be made up by overzealous efforts, nor can it be caught up through acquired training. The reason why geniuses are called geniuses is because the gap between geniuses and mortals is a gap that can never be crossed. So, Ah-chan, are you trying to feel the painting style of Mr. Nizuma by copying her comics? Looking at the large number of copied comics piled up on the table, the cartoonist looked at each other in bewilderment. Through a large amount of copying training, can you really find the painting style of the cartoonist? No, 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 this is basically impossible. After all, there are no leaves in the world that can be thought of in the same way. Humans have their own unique understanding and feelings of things, not to mention that cartoonists will be affected by emotional fluctuations when completing comics. Therefore, it is already very good to be able to imitate comics to a certain extent. As for reaching the level of there is no truth that fakes are not as good as the real thing, the better way to say it is too high pursuit, and the worse way to say it is the so-called wishful thinking. So, should we say that Takahashi Makoto is stupid? This kind of thing can't be done, right? As the artist in charge of drawing in the Yachin Mumenjai group, Landai really didn't want to deny Takahashi Makoto's efforts, so he used a questioning tone. However, the cartoonists present could hear the hidden meaning of Landai. Well, it's really impossible. Even if I use the 4th level ability of Gene Lock, I can almost simulate the personality of the Black Flame King, but... Takahashi Makoto picked up the previously copied comic manuscript and the sample for copying from the table, and said calmly to the cartoonists, "The style of the Black Flame King is really impossible to reproduce." "Oh, but it's already very similar." Nizuma Eiji carefully observed the comic manuscript in Takahashi Makoto's hand. The more he looked at it, the more surprised he was. Finally, he couldn't help but shouting excitedly, "Is this your special ability, Mr. Fengguangai Yuan? It's super powerful." Tisk. If it's just a simple copy. After staring at the comic manuscript in Takahashi Makoto's hand for a long time, the silver-haired boy Fukuda complained a little depressed, "Although I also have confidence that I can copy it, but if I can do it to this extent, tisk, I'm not happy." "Hey, what do you think of the highest level?" The man with yellow hair and glasses gently touched his good friend with his elbow. "If it were you, would you be able to do it to the same level as Chang? I remember that you copied Dragon Ball in order to train your painting skills, right?" "Akito, what Chang is doing now is completely different from what I did back then." Although he was a little unwilling, Landai still admitted his shortcomings very readily. "Even if I copied the Dragon Ball comics for a long time, I still couldn't draw a comic in the same style as Dragon Ball." "Huh? In other words?" The man with yellow hair and glasses looked at his good friend in surprise. "Now Chang can draw comics in the same style as Eiji Naizuma?" "No, of course Aiken can't." Landai stared at the copy of the manga draft completed by Makoto Takahashi. "The so-called copying is just based on the existing manga draft. As long as the cartoonist's basic skills are good, basically, you can draw it all, but if you want to draw a comic in the same style as the original author, it is impossible no matter how basic the cartoonist's skills are." "Why is this?" Just ask when you encounter something you don't understand. This is a good habit of the yellow-haired glasses guy, and it is also the reason why the yellow-haired glasses guy keeps making progress. It's very troublesome to describe the specific theory. After pondering for a moment, Landai scratched his head in confusion. "Let's give a simple example. In the comics, the male protagonist starts a battle with the enemy. The way we usually deal with it is to show the way of fighting through narration and the changes in expressions between comic characters. By the way, unlike Ajumu and you, I am not used to adding narration during battles. Instead, I like to express it by depicting the collision of fists and bodies, and the bleeding of characters." Suddenly intervened in the conversation, "It's the silver-haired guy Fukuda who always keeps a straight face and says I'm super unhappy right now. If your comics, Aiken Mumenjai, are realistic, then my comics should be more exaggerated." "Oh, that's it, little sea otter, can you not suddenly clasp your fists and pretend to be enlightened? In fact, you didn't understand the exchange between the gay group Aiken Mumenjai and the silver-haired boy Fukudaki at all, right? Teachers Ajumu and teacher Fukuda are right, that's exactly what they said." Eiji Naizuma looked at Makoto Takahashi with some confusion. "Then Mr. Phoenix Academy, what are your plans next?" "Next, of course, we will continue to copy." Makoto Takahashi looked as if he was taking it for granted, which shocked everyone around the cartoonist. "Eh? Why, classmate," Landai shouted in surprise. "Chang, you clearly know that this kind of thing can't be done, why are you still wasting time and persisting?" "Because it's very interesting to say." "And?" Makoto Takahashi picked up the copy of the manga manuscript on the table and said with a smile to Eiji Shinzuma, "Don't forget, the manga artist Shinkai Makoto is the real person, but I the king of Black Flame." "But..." Yes, I admit that there are things that even the arrogant manga artist Hohoin Koshin cannot do. but Makoto Takahashi stared at all the mangaka members and said seriously, if it's because of being afraid and not trying, choosing to retreat because of cowardice, the unruly soul in my body will cry because of this. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 462. The conversation between Makoto Takahashi and the cartoonist side, no, to be precise, it should be that after Makoto Takahashi fully demonstrated the domineering spirit of a certain middle-class cartoonist to all the cartoonist side, the conversation was obviously over. It can't go on any longer. Under the intimidation of a middle-class cartoonist with magic sword and the temptation of food, all the cartoonist side members did not leave quickly because of the embarrassment of the previous conversation, but instead stayed frightened, so to say fearful is largely due to the magic sword in Makoto Takahashi's hand. After all, even the short-tempered silver-haired boy Fukuda, a middle-class cartoonist who drew his sword at the slightest disagreement after just uttering a dissatisfaction, put the cold light demon sword on the opponent's neck. So, all the members of the cartoonist side agreed to participate in the dark cuisine experiment under the kind invitation of a certain middle-level cartoonist, no, they were having lunch with Makoto Takahashi. Although the cartoonist side Kwan is a little worried about Takahashi Makoto using the word dark cuisine to describe his own cuisine, considering the character of a middle-class cartoonist and the various abnormal words and deeds in the past, the cartoonist side Kwan the members no longer have to worry about it, especially when the pair of good friends Ajumu revealed their dark history and told the glorious experience of having a mixed meal with Makoto Takahashi for a period of time. The cartoonist side the attitude of all members towards Takahashi Makoto's dark cuisine has changed from fear to expectation. However, this expectation did not last too long, and was completely shattered because of the silver-haired boy Fukuda. According to normal circumstances, when Makoto Takahashi, as the host, is in charge of preparing the dishes, the cartoonist side as the guests do not need to go to the kitchen to help at all, they only need to wait quietly in the living room. Originally, this is what cartoonists did, but this common sense doesn't work for a certain middle-level cartoonist. Because Makoto Takahashi is simply not a being who can use common sense to judge. My believer, little sea otter, don't you know that to completely control a woman, you need to have a very high level of cooking skills? The way to persuade little sea otter is quite simple, just start with the woman. A woman like Miss Kang Shuhong is very concerned about her figure. If you learn how to limit the energy of ingredients in cooking, I think Miss Kang Shuhong will never be able to do without you in the future. So, if you want to learn, go into the kitchen and carefully observe the production process of dark cuisine. But Lord Phoenix Academy, can I really learn it? The little sea otter put on a very troubled and unconfident face. On the one hand, it was because what Takahashi Makoto said was very tempting to the little sea otter. On the other hand, before marrying Miss Kang Shuhong, little sea otter was the kind of civil servant who rarely cooked. Although the quality of cooking is indeed determined by talent. Before Takahashi Makoto finished speaking, little sea otter had completely lost his confidence. When it comes to drawing comics or something, the little sea otter can indeed be regarded as having a talent that is no less than a genius, but when it comes to cooking skills, but Makoto Takahashi's next words rekindled the little sea otter's hope. But talent is not perfect, no matter cooking or comics, as long as the creator has love in his heart, then the completed works will respond to that feeling. Little sea otter, you don't have to believe in yourself, but you have to believe in me who believes in you. Lord Phoenix Academy God, I believe you, right? He's just a little sea otter who doesn't like to work, but he has those sparkling eyes. Then the next goal is Makoto Takahashi, who had successfully abducted the little sea otter, turned his eyes like finding a new prey to his good friend Yachin Mumanjai whose mouth was twitching. Duo, Lande, and Huang Mao glasses, what is your choice? Let's go in by ourselves. After seeing the little sea otter successfully tamed by Takahashi Makoto in a few words, Aiken Mumenjai and the two had completely lost the so-called heart of resistance, so when they heard Takahashi Makoto again after asking the question, not only did he take the initiative to reveal his choice, but to show his sincerity, he also deliberately entered the kitchen before Takahashi Makoto could speak. Bang! Seeing the cooperative behavior of the two good friends Yachen Mumenjai, Takahashi Makoto couldn't help but feel unhappy for no reason. However, he was unhappy, and Takahashi Makoto did not continue to struggle, but instead his eyes turned to the silver-haired boy Fukuda with a horse-like face. "Hey, silver-haired brother, you are the only one left now." "Humph. I'm not one of those spineless guys." The silver-haired boy Fukuda was very energetic and was not as afraid of Takahashi Makoto as the previous ones. "Speaking of which, Chen, you still have a lot of manga manuscripts to complete. Let's not talk about showing off your cooking skills through cooking. Do you need to spend time to persuade me to watch you show off your cooking skills?" "Oh, actually, I don't really want to do this, but it is something that cannot be avoided. After all, this is the so-called price." Seeing the confused look of the silver-haired brother Fukuda, Takahashi Makoto he spread his hands helplessly and sighed with resentment. "Hey, silver-haired brother Fukuda, do you know why I was able to complete so many manga manuscripts in such a short period of time? Because I am the legendary contract." "Huh? Contractor? What is that?" Although the silver-haired boy Fukuda quickly realized that he should not ask this question, but it was too late. "I remember that one night in the summer when I was 12 years old, I was observing the stars to calculate the fate of the world and mankind, and suddenly I found that the starry sky had changed." Although Takahashi Makoto used a lucky expression on his face to release the legendary memory-killing skill, for the silver-haired brother Fusion, it was no less than a nuclear weapon-level attack. "Although the scene I witnessed was only a moment, I still found my changes. From then on, I had to hide in human society as a contractor." I said, "Chen, The silver-haired brother Fusion said that if he didn't admit defeat, he would probably kneel down, but before he could say the words of admitting defeat, Takahashi Makoto once again interrupted him with the memory-killing skill. "As a contractor, every time I use my special abilities, I have to pay the corresponding price. Otherwise, according to the rules, I will most likely soften my whole body and turn into a disgusting jelly body like a slime. Although I don't discriminate against jelly creatures like slimes, I feel quite disgusted when I think that I will become the same existence as a certain sister control. So, silver-haired brother, do you understand?" Takahashi Makoto looked at the silver-haired brother Fukuda, who was about to collapse with a slap in the face. "Inviting you to observe the production of dark cuisine is actually just to fulfill the price of being a contractor, that's all." The corners of his mouth twitched, and the corners of his eyes twitched as well. The silver-haired brother Fukuda finally said nothing, and walked into the kitchen silently with a regretful expression. Although he wanted to complain about Takahashi Makoto, through his previous experience, the silver-haired brother Fukuda knew very well that once he started to complain, then, he would be destroyed by a certain middle school cartoonist again. Then, it's the legendary dark cooking time. Takahashi Makoto walked slowly into the kitchen with a dark smile on his face.